Day. This week has gone very quickly. I hope it has for you as well. It's also like the beginning of summer, more or less. And with that comes some pretty big developments and a couple of very big stories that we're bringing your way. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I like boating. Big, like really big. Been captaining my own boat since I was 6. That is not a joke. And so when a story comes across my radar that has to do with boating or marinas or water or lake, I perk up. And one came across my desk today that made me feel heebie-jeebies, but also fascinated. Because a woman in Texas who was kind of living in a marina on a boat with her boyfriend was found dead, hanging off a dock, half in the water. You got my attention. Because I've been on a lake for 56 years, and I've never seen that. Certainly not at a marina. But this young woman, mother of 4, 30 years old, found hanging. Here's the weird part. And because I know you are true crime junkies, her arm was in a position that does not look like it would be if she really took her own life. So the question became very, very quickly for police, yeah, this is not a suicide. This looks like someone wanted it to look like a suicide. Sheriff is joining me tonight. He's going to answer a whole bunch of questions about that. And there are 2 people of interest as well, 2 persons of interest. One of them, the boyfriend, the one who owns the boat where they were living. All that's coming in just a few moments. And if there weren't a theme tonight, it's kind of like there are a lot of like mysteriously dead moms on this program. Not the least of which those 2 Oklahoma moms, right? The whole Grandma Tiffany story. Big developments in that one, too. So I have a question for you. If you're in a small town and you have a normal-sized courthouse that's kind of small for a small town, what do if you have 5 defendants and all their attorneys and then all the prosecution and the judge and the bailiff and the security, not to mention the gallery, and then the media, because this story, what do you do? Do you find a church basement and move the case to a bigger space like that? Do you find a wedding hall, a banquet hall? How do you try a massive case in kind of a small town? And I haven't even begun with jury selection. Man, this one's going to be tough, but I've got some fabulous people who are going to talk logistics tonight. Like a judge who's been through it before. That's coming. And also, I don't know where you were on this night 23 years ago, but I was sitting in an anchor desk, kind of like my first big national news job in New York, and it was another network, shall remain nameless, begins with M. This thing came. I always have a laptop. I'm just going to show you. I always have like a laptop on the desk with me, and this story crossed while I was on the air live. And I looked at it and I thought, that's got to be a typo. It's got to be a problem. It was a Texas mother drowned 5 of her own children in her bathtub. Got to be a mistake. Was not a mistake. It was the story of Andrea Yates, her husband Rusty Yates, and 5 of the most beautiful children you'll ever lay eyes on, who are not with us today because Andrea Yates, she drowned all 5 of them one by one in the bathtub. And the story that happened afterwards was as big as that first day when it crossed. The trials, yes, plural, that she went through. The acquittal that she got. And I know I got your attention now, right? How do you drown 5 of your kids and you get acquitted? You get acquitted if you're deemed to be insane. And then what? What 23 years later? You're going to find out everything. Now, 23 years later, where is Andrea Yates? What's happening with her? Will she ever get out? I want to begin, though, here with this question that every police department in the world will face at one time or another, and probably a lot more than they'd like to. When is a suicide not actually a suicide? When is a tragedy actually a grim and foul crime? We've covered this before. You may have seen our coverage of the South Carolina pastor's wife, Micah Miller, a death that not everybody believed was a suicide. But tonight our mystery is in Texas. It's actually the outskirts of Houston, right on the Gulf Coast, a town called League City. 3 weeks ago tomorrow, on May 31st, late in the afternoon, a man who lives on a boat at the Wharf Marina saw something that he's never going to unsee. He saw a woman's body hanging off the end of a dock. It was Giselle Tapia Salazar, 30 years old, mom of 4. She also lived on a boat at the Wharf Marina. with her boyfriend, the boat's owner. Then at first glance, it may well have looked as though the victim took her own life, suicide, hanging off the dock. But at second glance, not so much. Her body was half submerged, and one of her arms was twisted and sticking up, with nothing to hold it in the up position. Well, if you're kind of smart at the forensics thing, didn't take the police too long to figure out that Tapia Salazar did not die there, hanging off the dock. She died somewhere else because rigor mortis had set in before she was likely moved to the dock and then maybe hanged at the dock. Tonight they have two persons of interest, one of whom is Giselle's boyfriend, a man named James Hart. And just hours ago, Hart spoke to NewsNation in his first national interview. Our national correspondent, Alex Capriello, joins me live now with that and much more. He's down in League City, Texas. You, my friend, Alex, have had a very busy day. This was like a reporter's dream. You have dug up so much information on this. First of all, talk to me about the victim's boyfriend, who you actually spoke with, even though he's a person of interest. Take me there.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable moment. One of these times where you don't expect to actually get the opportunity to speak to somebody, but then sure enough, they are more than willing to come forward and share all. And so really it was about me going to the marina, knocking on James Hart's boat, literally knocking on it as if it was the door. And there he is. He comes on out. And I just wanted to see how he's doing. What's he like? What's his demeanor? What's his overall behaviors? He was actually quite open with me, coming and spending about 15 minutes sitting on a bench. And he really spilled all. In all honesty, from my perspective, he was heartbroken about everything that happened to Giselle. He said that his last 3 weeks have just been terrible for him. He really has trouble working, living, sleeping without thinking about her all the time. Just about everything inside the boat and surrounding him reminds him of her. He really can't believe that his girlfriend is gone, and certainly he recognized the pressure that's being put on him, the sort of attention that since he was the last person to see Giselle alive, that a lot of fingers are being pointed at him. But even still, he denies any wrongdoing, says he has nothing to do with Giselle's death. Take a listen to our conversation together.
It never registered like she passed away, that like this is all really happening, and I just broke down, and just didn't believe it, still don't believe it, still just waiting for her to come out from the bathroom, It's really weird that she would just go do that, I mean, she had some issues, and she was supposed to go to treatment on the 27th. There's cameras everywhere, okay? I mean, everywhere on this dock. There's no reason this should not be on film. Everybody's got cameras. Cameras right there, right there. That's the main gate. There's no reason for this to continue. I don't understand why it still is. It's crazy because I found myself in the middle of this whole thing with literally nothing to hide. I had nothing to do with this. And so, when you're telling the truth, it's really easy because you don't have to lie about anything,
And when I did speak to police, they were incredibly clear. James is most certainly a person of interest. That being said, he is cooperating with the police. He's gone over there and interviewed with them multiple times. He turned over his phone. Police said they did a full dump of his phone, and they're using that as part of their evidence collection. But at the same time, he does not believe that he should be responsible. He feels like he was not involved with this death in any way. And in fact, he says that he also wants justice for Giselle.
So it might be too early to ask this question, but do you know of any hints or inklings? Was there domestic abuse in the history of this couple?
Yes, I do know that, and I know that because, number one, I found that out from police. They said that there was a history of domestic violence there. And then also, number two, from the other boaters and neighbors who live in that marina. I spoke to one man, the man who actually found her body, and he says that he would often hear them in shouting matches, yelling at the top of their lungs, screaming at each other in one moment, but then the next second later, you'll see them and they're holding hands and kissing and making up. So that was sort of the nature of their relationship. Also, speaking to the police, they said that Giselle had been arrested 4 times just this spring. One of those arrests was for assaulting James.
Wow. Okay, what about the neighbor who found Giselle's body? That's got to be overwhelming, Alex, for somebody who lives in that marina. You can imagine this halcyon, wonderful environment of living on a boat and then coming across that discovery.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing that he had to witness. This is a very close-knit marina community. Boats are literally sitting right next to each other on the slips. They're almost like a family together. And so he knew James, he knew Giselle. And so to come outside one morning to be cleaning up the pier and the marina after a big storm and to see her body lifeless like that, her lips turning blue, it really is something that's traumatized him to this very day. He says he wakes up in the middle of the night and sees her body just like that. He also noticed the rigor mortis had set in. He saw that her left arm was almost vertically in the air, something that also drew his suspicions. Here's more of my conversation with him. So tell me, first and foremost, just your memories from that morning, what you saw, what you heard.
I woke up and we had a lot of rain. So when you have a lot of rain, you have a lot of debris that comes down the creek because Clear Creek is off to our south. And so I went out there and was just freeing the debris that had wrapped around the pylons on the dock. And so I went all the way down to the end of Dock 22, but I didn't look back towards the gate, otherwise I would have saw her then. Instead, I walked out and around and went down Dock 13 and freed up some more debris. And it was on the way back that I saw her hair. I thought it was fishing string at first, and then the wind really caught it, and it was a full head of hair. So that's when I realized that something was there. I thought it was a mannequin when I walked up there first. And that's when I realized it wasn't a mannequin, it was a person. And so I was about to touch her, and then I realized her lips were blue, so it wouldn't have really mattered at that point anyways. So,
what was your first move then? Call 911 and leave it as
Actually,
is?
I yelled at someone else to call 911 because I didn't have my phone on me because I was just walking around the dock. And some people were on the dock farther down visiting their boat, and they called 911. And then I went and woke up her boyfriend, James, and waited until, kept him back because he kept trying to fight me to get past me, and kept saying she just went to the bathroom, everything's fine.
And Christian's doing whatever he can to help out with this investigation and including turning over all of his video and audio clips from his boat. He hopes that the investigation wraps up soon. He's got kids of his own that he likes to bring out to the marina, bring out on the boat, but he no longer feels comfortable bringing to them just because it could be still that there is a murderer living among them. We don't know that. Nobody's been charged officially, but that is the ongoing theory from so many of these boaters.
So what about, I know Christian mentioned that her lips were blue, but did he notice if there were any marks on her body, or have the police talked about any injuries that might have led them a little closer to what happened to her other than potential suicide?
Yeah, other than the arm being stuck in the upright position from that rigor mortis, there really was no other alarming marks, scratches, or anything that drew the attention of both Christian or the police. In fact, one thing that the lieutenant told me was that often when somebody goes and tries to commit suicide by hanging, one of their first things they'll do when actually committing that act is to immediately reach up and, in a moment of trying to save themselves, start to tug at the rope, and therefore you'll see scratch marks on the neck. So the lieutenant told me that there was really no signs of trauma or scratching on the neck. On top of that, her windpipe was fully intact, which tells them that she did not die by strangulation. And if it was a true hanging, you would also probably see that windpipe being broken. So no official cause of death from the preliminary medical examiner who's running this autopsy. So they can't really come to an official determination on that yet.
Okay, Christian mentioned something about helping out the police, with cameras and all the rest. Are there cameras around? Have the police been able to look at any kind of ring-style cameras, even though it's a marina?
Yeah, this is unbelievable, Ashleigh. The police tell me that they have more than 2,000 video clips, some that are only a few seconds, some that are minutes long, that are all around that marina. Just about everyone who has a boat has a camera on top of that. And so the police detectives went out and they gathered as much of that video and audio clips as possible. But the most unbelievable part about it, 2,000 clips, and there's not one of them, the police say, that actually shows the exact location where her body was found. There are some other suspicious things that they are looking at, one of which is that one of the cameras on or near the marina, you can actually see a hand physically go up, grab the camera, and twist it and turn it around so it faces the opposite direction. They don't know who did that. They don't know if that was on purpose or not. But there is some sketchy things that are happening with this surveillance camera, these more than 2,000 clips that they have that they're monitoring very closely and could factor into this investigation.
Wow, 2,000 clips. Well, maybe they'll find the owner of that hand walking through one of those 2,000 clips towards the camera that was mysteriously shoved out of the way. That's a real no-brainer. Alex Capriello, awesome reporting, just incredible reporting down there. Keep it up and let us know what's next, what happens next, and what they find out next. Thank you for this.
Will do, Ashleigh. Thanks.
Alex doing a great job down near Houston. And still to come tonight, we knew it was a big case. But is a double murder trial with 5 defendants and all their lawyers and all the jurors, is it just too big for a small-town Oklahoma courtroom? Or will the accused, the so-called God's misfits, turn on one another long before opening statements? We're going to look at where the case stands and whether it's standing room only when we come back. The case of those 2 murdered Kansas moms in the Oklahoma Panhandle, that was big. That was huge. Like right from the very start, it was big. There's the crime itself, right? Total mystery, leading to this brutal and shocking revelation. There's also the sheer number of the suspects, like 5. All of them members of this pseudo-religious anti-government fringe group called God's Misfits. And there is the mountain of evidence as well, which prosecutors may just have to haul into court in wheelbarrows. There's so much of it. Circumstantially, Grandma Tiffany up there on the top left, she's the plot's alleged mastermind. She was locked in a bitter custody dispute with one of the victims. Here's what the court documents have hinted at so far in this case. Police say that Grandma searched the web for, quote, taser pain level, gun shops, prepaid cell phones, and how to get someone out of their home. She then bought 5 stun guns and 3 burner phones. The teenage daughter of 2 of the other suspects, they told police that Tiffany gave 2 of the phones to her parents. And then later, that daughter said her mom admitted everything, that the group of 5 killed Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly and disposed of their bodies. Search warrants revealed that the bodies were found 10 feet underground. And that's not enough. They were in a freezer chest, buried on a property that Tiffany's boyfriend and co-defendant had been leasing. Not too far away from where the bodies were buried, investigators found clothing, duct tape, and a saw handle and a knife sheath, all with what looked like blood on them, as well as a taser. And I could go on. I could go on and on. But how does a small town prosecute such a big case? We're starting to find out. Yesterday, we discovered it's not easy to cram 5 defendants, 7 defense attorneys, 3 prosecutors, and 9 deputies into a small-town courtroom. You can see in this layout that they had to actually pull out the card tables. And they also had to remove the jury chairs to fit everybody in the room. So what happens when the jury has to be in there? It's a good question. And while that might actually work right now in the pretrial phase, it's a non-starter for the real trial. And what then? Do you rent a hall somewhere? Guyman, Oklahoma is a town of 13,000. There's a McDonald's, there's a Taco Bell, and a Walmart, but there's no convention center and no massive banquet halls that we could find. And could they even find an impartial jury there anyway? My next guest has faced these issues, these questions before. Mary Claire Akers is a circuit judge in Kanawha County, West Virginia. Rules of judicial conduct do not allow judges to comment on specific cases, but the judge has agreed to talk to us about general court procedures. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Judge Akers. Let's just start with the basics. That's a lot of defendants, like 5 of them. And at count right now, it looks like 7 attorneys. That's not including the prosecutors over on the other side, not including all the bailiffs and the court staff and the security and the judge. And we don't have the jury in there. What is general court procedure when you're just loaded for bear with defendants?
Well, I would say this. First of all, thank you, Ashleigh, for having me on. I really appreciate it. As far as courtroom procedure in a situation where there are many parties and many different people there at the tables, it is really up to the courts to maintain safety at all times. That will be probably the biggest focus of whatever trial would occur anywhere. Again, I can't talk about anything specific, and I won't talk about anything specific here as far as what you're talking about tonight. But what I can tell you is, generally, if a court has a case with a large amount of parties, the first thing the court is going to be doing is looking at safety to make sure you can provide a safe environment for the jurors, for the public, for anybody that would be in there, the parties, the litigants, everybody. And the second thing that the court is going to be doing is looking around at alternate, if there is such a large amount of parties in a case, the court is going to be looking around for maybe alternate spaces to have a trial that would contain a large amount of people.
That's the issue I kept sort of going over in my head, because I covered a case once that was in a convention center because there was just so many people that were involved. And I remember thinking, there's nothing special about an actual courthouse. It's not legal tender. It is possible to physically find another location and hold, judicial procedure, correct?
It absolutely is. And the courthouse is wherever we say it is, if in a situation like that. And I'm sure that they would be looking at alternate places. Maybe schools would be an example of somewhere that they may look, if that's something that is permissible for the court to provide a safe environment. Again, that is going to be the paramount thing that the court is looking at in any situation, not this specific or any other specific situation, but that is what the court is going to be doing, trying to find any kind of alternate space if the court is faced with a trial of any sort, criminal or civil, which would include a whole lot of parties and a whole lot of interested people.
Boy, I hope if they choose a school gymnasium that they do it in the summer when clearly there'll be no kids anywhere around to see this horrible parade of ugly that's going to go through there. The evidence is just despicable. So I know, again, you can't comment on this case, but I am curious about small town justice, because in an area like this that is so close-knit, you could have a lot of friends of these five, and you could have a lot of enemies of these five. We've heard all sorts of reporting on Grandma Tiffany having made plenty of enemies around town. So what is the court to do to ensure an unbiased jury pool?
Well, again, I can't ever comment on any specific case or any specific matter, but what I can tell you is that the role of the court is to provide a fair trial for all parties. And the court is going to undertake to do that in all cases, every big and small, through whatever means are necessary. So that's the court's job. That's what the court will be doing in all trials, not specific to anything here, but that is the role of the court. That is for the court to determine, and that's something the court has to figure out.
Yeah, I sense that we are going to hear multiple motions for, change of venue. Whether it's from the prosecutors or defense, I'm not sure, but it is such a fascinating case. And Judge Mary Claire Akers, I can't thank you enough for helping us to muddle through some of these procedures. And again, I know you can't be specific, but you've been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Look forward to the next time. Okay, so last night, we brought you this jaw-dropping case of a Florida plastic surgeon who was charged with killing his wife during a botched series of cosmetic procedures. And if you were watching, you heard the allegation that this may have been a manslaughter waiting to happen, with police saying that his practice was fast and loose with drugs and that unlicensed staff performed medical procedures. Coming up after a break, the sheriff in charge of the investigation joins me live to fill in the details. A plastic surgeon in Florida is charged tonight with second-degree homicide and, as well, another charge, manslaughter. All of this in the death of his favorite patient. And I'm assuming that she was his favorite patient because it was his wife. And that wife was also a part-time, unlicensed, untrained staff member at his practice, a practice that is, I think it's fair to say, understandably closed. Authorities say on the day of her operation, Hillary Brown actually prepped her own IV bags and popped, quote, a handful of multicolored pills, which included Valium, end quote, before seizing on the table and dying of complications a week later. We brought you this story last night, along with some of the stunning allegations that would later come from police and state officials. The alleged use of controlled medications by staff members to, quote, take the edge off. Dr. Benjamin Brown's alleged habit of wearing unsterile watches and jewelry in the operating room. And then this one. This is bad. Brazilian butt lifts that he allegedly performed on multiple patients who'd actually refused it, said, no, don't want it, got it anyway. I'm joined now by the man who investigated this case for Santa Rosa County and who also arrested Dr. Brown. That happened on Monday. Sheriff Bob Johnson is here today. Sheriff, thank you so much for being here. Was the doctor cooperative in this investigation so far?
No, not at all. The only word out of his mouth was lawyer, and that's the only interaction we had with him.
Is that why it took 7 months to bring charges in this case?
Well, no, that wasn't the reason. The reason was in a case this complex with a lot of medical issues, we had to wait on reports to get back. Blood toxicity, things of that nature, and that takes sometimes months to get those back. So once we received those reports, we did a report up, sent it to the state attorney's office who thought there was probable cause, and then sent it to a judge who signed off on it.
Do we have any idea why? Because the thing that stood out to me, apart from a lot of the reporting in this case, is that it took, I think, 20 minutes or so. And maybe I might be off here, but it took quite some time before the doctor agreed to call 911 when she started seizing on the table, even though people who were in the operating room were, encouraging him to call for help.
Yeah, correct. So he had nurses in the room, and when she began to seize, they all said, let's dial 911, and he said, no, we'll handle it here. And he continued to do that, and then finally it got so bad that they finally called 911. But as you know, a week later, he expired.
And if he's not talking, I suppose it's kind of hard to get a reason as to why there was that lull, or did any of the witnesses provide a reason why he was abstaining from calling for help so quickly?
No, they didn't provide a reason, but I mean, they all wanted to call 911 pretty much immediately upon her seizure occurring. And I guess, and this is just a guess on my part, I thought, or he thought he could handle it. And obviously he could not handle it because she died.
So it's interesting you say that, Sheriff, because, my first inclination, I always smell a rat. I'm a crime reporter. So first thing I thought was, well, maybe he wanted this to happen. Maybe there's an acrimonious marriage. And then I saw they've only been married 16 months. Do you know if there were any red flags? Do you know if there was any sort of problem in the marriage?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it a red flag, but they did, some of the workers there indicated they got in arguments in front of the co-workers. But I don't know that would be a red flag. If you're married for any amount of time, you're going to argue with your spouse. So, but that's all they said.
Yeah, makes sense. I am curious about all the reports that came in about just horrendous allegations from staff there saying filthy practice, all sorts of people doing, finishing up procedures who don't have the medical training, even this poor victim, this wife, performing some sorts of procedures herself. I saw that this is a second-degree murder charge. Do you think it might be overcharged, or do you think there should be more charges just for operating a shoddy practice?
Well, he was charged with manslaughter by negligence. And, when it comes to a shoddy practice, that's the AMA that gets involved there, and they suspended his license, obviously. But, it was pretty loose in that office, according to the people who worked there, about, taking pills, prepping your own IV bags, just things you'd never think a doctor would do, and also operating on his own wife. I'm pretty sure the AMA frowns on that as well, even though it's not a violation of Florida state law. It's still something you shouldn't do.
Yeah, well, Sheriff, I'm still curious about the second-degree homicide as well as the manslaughter. I'm curious to see what happens as the case, moves forward. I hope you'll join us again, because I think there's more to this, and we're just beginning to learn about it. Will you come back on the show?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Sheriff Bob Johnson joining us live tonight. You will see him again. Coming up, you should know, I should tell you that tomorrow, the father of the victim is going to join us live on this program. So that's really important. Hillary Brown's father, Marty Ellinger, has agreed to come on the program. So make sure you join us then. And still to come tonight, think back, this date, 2001. Do you remember where you were? It was still weeks before 9/11, and a headline hit us all like a gut punch. A mother in Texas named Andrea Yates killed all 5 of her little children, drowning each one of them one by one in the bathtub. It's been 23 years since that horror, but where is Andrea Yates now? Coming up next, 2 people who are in regular contact with her. They'll answer the question, will she ever be released? Stay right there.
I can't help due to burning and stabbing pain in my hands, so I use Nervive.
Nervive's clinical dose of ALA reduces nerve discomfort in as little as 7 days.
Now I can help again. Feel the difference with Nervive.
You know how you always remember where you were and what you were doing when some huge news event happens? I will never forget this date, June 20th, 2001. I was on the anchor desk at another network, and it was a pretty normal news day when suddenly it was not a normal news day. Mother of 5 in Texas had been arrested for killing all 5 of her little babies, drowning them one by one in the bathtub inside their Houston, Texas home. And then I saw the ages, and I couldn't believe it. The oldest child was 7, and the youngest one was just 6 months, just a baby. The mother's name was and is Andrea Yates, and her sickening story and 2 murder trials were above the fold for months and years to come, even after 9/11, which happened just 2 months later. Tonight, it's hard to even say this out loud, it marks 23 years since Andrea Yates killed those babies in a psychotic attempt to, quote, protect them from the devil, she said. I'm joined now by George Parnham, who was Yates' attorney through both of her trials, and he remains in regular contact with Andrea today. George Parnham, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I want to ask you, this anniversary means a lot to me, and I have no connection to Andrea or Rusty or the children, but every time I hear it's the anniversary, it just stabs me in the heart. I wondered, because I know you're in regular contact with Andrea, if this anniversary is marked by her in any way, or if she has any recollection or any thought about what happened this day 23 years ago.
Well, I have represented Andrea from day one, 23 years ago, or 22, and I am in constant contact with her, but believe it or not, and I have no problem in saying this, I have never, ever had any conversation, attorney-client or otherwise, with her about that day. There's really no need to have done that, simply because all the information that I needed to represent her throughout both trials was in the form of offense reports, statements made on video, her interviews, things of that nature. So I had everything that I needed to represent her throughout both trials. As you know, the state was seeking the death penalty, and the jury rejected that in the first trial, gave her life, but based on the perjured testimony of Dr. Park Dietz, the state's forensic psychiatrist, the case was reversed. We went back to trial, and the jury acquitted her, found her not guilty by reason of insanity. So that's basically the background. By reason of insanity.
I'll tell you what, Attorney Parnham, you're a hell of a lawyer. You single-handedly, I think, discovered, I remember it being so fascinating, discovered that Park Dietz had testified on the stand that there was a Law and Order episode, and surely Andrea couldn't be insane because she was mimicking everything she saw on the Law and Order episode. And you came back in the appeal and said that episode never aired. So it was impossible for Andrea to ever have mimicked that. And then and you prevailed in the second trial. I'm so fascinated, though, with this long relationship you've had with her. Maybe it's because you're a lawyer and I'm a journalist. The first question I have is, what has she told her therapists? Where is she with her psychosis? Obviously, this is what the system is all about. If you are insane and not guilty by insanity, you can get better and one day be released, which is why I asked the question. Does she have thoughts? Does she have memories? Does she talk about the situation? Does she talk about the killings? Do you ever ask the caregivers or the therapists where she's at with all of that?
I've never talked to her about that day, and that's basically my decision. There's really no need to do that, and like I say, all the information that I need to represent her came out during the course of interviews had with witnesses with her. Dr. Dietz, for whatever reason, fabricated and a non-existent, actually, episode of Law and Order that he said he was a consultant on. It just so happened that never happened. And I appealed the case once the jury found her guilty, not of death, but gave her an automatic life. I appealed the case on 16 points of error, the first error being the perjured testimony of Park Dietz. The case was reversed, sent back down to the court. He testified again, and the jury ended up acquitting her. And ironically, I told the jury that...
sorry to interrupt, but all these years later, Mr. Parnham, being in contact, first of all, I'm fascinated that you're still in contact with your client 23 years later. Do you hope that one day she is released and she's deemed well enough to be entered back into society? Do you hope that for her? Well,
ironically, she comes up for review once a year, and she waives that. I am there in court with her every October, and not with her. She doesn't have to come down to court, and but she waives a review. She is in a state facility. That's where she chooses to be, and I see her frequently, perhaps once every 2 months, and get to see her and talk with her frequently on the phone, and she is where she wants to be and needs to be. And simply put, everybody in her life is gone. She has no place to go other than coming up and living with us here in Apple Springs. Ironically, I remember, and this is not on point, but I remember getting her out of jail on a bond that a bondsman made when the judge set a bond of $200,000 after the reversal. I brought her up on the way to Rusk, stopped off here in Apple Springs at a little place that I have in East Texas, and I remember taking Andrea out, and there's some cows across the way, and the cows came up to the fence, and Andrea petted the cows, and then I took her to Rusk and dropped her off.
Wow. George Parnham, I appreciate you being on. I'm going to call you in October when that next review comes up. I'm going to give you a call and just see if it's the same as every other of these last 23 years. Thank you for being here. I also want to bring in Ferry Caroline. Ferry is Rusty Yates's aunt. Rusty was Andrea's husband back then and the father of those 5 children. And Ferry still thinks of Andrea as her niece. Ferry, thank you so much for being with me. You probably just heard George Parnham's interview. You're also in contact, as I understand it, with Andrea. What are your conversations with her like?
Well, I don't have conversations with her. I write her, and she writes me. So we converse by letter. I don't have a phone conversation with her. I could get on that list possibly, but she has a certain number of people that she can talk with, and I really don't want to prevent any of her family members or George or anybody that really needs to get through to her from doing that. So I simply communicate with her by letter.
I'll ask you the same question I asked George Parnham, and that is, do you believe that she can be rehabilitated, maybe that she is rehabilitated and that she can get out one day, maybe even one day soon?
Well, while I have a counseling background, I don't have a background in severe mental illnesses. That's not something that I specifically chose to work in. So I would never make that decision for her or for anyone else in that kind of respect. She did not just have postpartum issues. She was found to be severely mentally ill, most likely with bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Someone else during the time of the trial thought she had schizophrenia. And there was some disagreement between different psychiatrists that actually examined her. But it was definitely more than postpartum issues. It always was.
I've seen a comment, I think, made by you that she's afraid of the public. Do you think that'll ever change?
I doubt it, and do understand that that's my personal perception. It might not be someone else's, but I do think she has concern about how she might be treated by the public. She knows that there was a lot of hatred expressed toward her. She received some hate mail. She's received hate mail since she's been in the hospital. Her mail, thankfully, is still screened, I believe. So that usually does not get through to her if it ever did. So that's where that lays. But she and I communicate about things she's doing and things that I'm doing. She knows that I recently started working with a new church. I came out of retirement to work with the church. So she's praying for me about that. She's told me about growing some vegetables and flowers in a garden. So she's doing things that she stays busy with.
I'm just fascinated. I'm so fascinated. And I'm so appreciative, Fairy Carolyn, that you came on to talk about this.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. Okay, coming up next, is it to serve and protect, or is it to stand and deliver, or maybe serve and deliver? Either way, police in Phoenix went above and beyond the other day after stopping and arresting a delivery driver in the middle of a food run. Stories next. I'm going to leave you tonight with my wish for you, and it's that if and when the police ever come to your door, uninvited, unexpected, it's to do what they did this week in Phoenix, deliver groceries. Seems these cops had just pulled over a food delivery driver for a traffic offense and then discovered he had an outstanding arrest warrant. But just because the driver was having a bad day doesn't mean that his customers should have a bad day. So the officers stepped up. Take a look.
Okay, so the DoorDash driver we have officers delivering our DoorDash. So thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
Have a good day.
All right.
That's okay. Unfortunate for the driver, but thank you so much. This is so wholesome, guys. Yep. Appreciate you.
No problem.
Yeah, so wholesome. Love that. Okay, tomorrow on the show, the Texas mom of 4 found hanging on the dock. All the ways, forensically, you can prove something isn't a suicide. That's tomorrow.